Good day, good day, good day, good day. How you doing? Good day, people. How you doing today? Today we're going to do a part 2 session on the practical model build. And today we're going to continue off with this magnificent practical model we built here. I'm the artist and designer Kevin McDowell, coming to you for Artizfacts Studio Gallery, right here at home. And I'm going to show you some of the wonderful projects I'm working on for my independent sci-fi film. So just sit tight, get ready. We're going to have lots of fun today. All right, let's get ready. All right, let's get into reality, get the characters. How you doing, folks? This is Kevin McDowell, your man here at ASG-Artizfacts Studio Gallery. I am working from home again, continuing off. This is part 2 of, and not to get too much into details because the project is for my independent film. I don't give it too much, but I want to give you a few tidbits and techniques on some of the things I've done for the practical model build. Just to give you more of an understanding, this is the model I've built for my project, and I want to give you a little bit of a 360. I'll do my attempt to give you a 360. I got my stuff set up here. You know, here's the balconies that I worked on just the other day, and I did another extensive view of the balconies. Oops. You know, side balconies here. I've went into a bit explaining the materials I used. I've used some clear acetate sheets and sorts. This is actually the frontal view of the structure, you know, which is like a stained glass up in here, and another view of the structure, which has additional balconies. Okay. The final approach with this would be to incorporate generative AI to enhance the effect. For my film project, most of the work that you see is going to be practical models. For the landscapes, for the characters, those characters were designed and developed using Autodesk. I did sketch using digital drawings of those characters and used Leonardo AI to basically convert them into photographic images, high resolution photographic images, and then that's how you'll see these characters come to life, from a drawing to an actual photographic image of a character. And then I use that with the prompt to then make the scenes. So I'm going to, at this point of this episode, show you some more of the practical models that are actually in the shot. I want to work on a few tidbits for today, just to show you some of the adhesive processes I use, like this. The Tamiya Extra Thin Cement. It's a model building cement. It's not an endorsement. Got this at Amazon. I usually use in this set. This is perfect for my process in terms of building the practical models using styrene sheets. You know, so I'm going to show you some scraps of styrene and some styrene tubing you get from the hobby shop or art supply store. These things after a while they become expensive. So I found more cost-effective ways depending on the tubing. Like, for instance, if the tubing is of this scale, a 3.8, what I usually do is I use plastic coat hangers. Plastic coat hangers, and the base of the coat hanger, and I just snip it and then use a, candle or a cigarette lighter to warp it and bend it, and I'll get the piping I want. So there's a couple of techniques I use that can also bring the cost down for that kind of thing. But for now, I'm going to work on a few strips of styrene because I have some open-ended areas on the model. I'll show that when I edit it in, and you'll see some areas where it's exposed wire and things of that nature. Like here, it is where I have the 9-volt battery, where I illuminate the model, the lights, and the 9-volt is in there. It's a little casing. So I'm going to cover that up. I'm going to create a couple of designs and things, look like paneling, whatever, and I'll cover this just so it makes it look more aesthetic with the design. All right, so let me jump right into it. So I have some scrap pieces of styrene, got my hot glue gun, blade. I'm gonna get some more blades. This blade's kind of dulled out, so I'm gonna get some sharpened blades. It's always good to work with a sharp blade. Rulers, straight edges, and I also need my cutting board. Cutting board is very essential because I want to cut into my table. And for purposes, for now, I just use a piece of old cardboard, or actually a piece of old painting, a canvas painting that I don't really use, and I use for scraps, so I'll use the back of that. So I'm going to bring that over in a second, and then we're going to continue this. All right, so what I went to go get is the X-Acto blades. I use these X-Acto blades after a while when I get kind of dulled out. There's paint on this, acrylic paint I use for scraping, so I'm not going to use the cut. I wouldn't recommend using that. Any dull blade when you're cutting styrene, even if it's a thin styrene, because you want to get a clean cut with a styrene, you can just score it. You don't really have to press hard into the styrene. You can just score it a few times, and then you bend it and it'll snap. It'll snap clean. But that's all based on how clean the score is, or your cut based on the blade. So now what I'm going to do for this instance, I'm looking around on my project, and I'm looking at areas which I need to refine, like this section in here, that little section where the electrical panel is, this unit that's supposed to power the system in part, but it's actually a battery. I don't want it to be this little block, so I want to give it some type of look to it. There's multiple ways I can do this. I also have, this is adhesive tile. Some of this adhesive tile I bought for my practical models for texturing. Some of the models you see in the background, landscape, I've used some of this for texturing, and also in some cases I use for windows, and just to give the more aesthetic of the structure of the architecture. But in this case, I can probably put that here because I already have some of it here. Some of it I painted over previously, but I might decide to match in and just make it look, we'll see. But for now, let me do this. I sometimes have a tendency to work between what I consider to be organic and also technical, in the sense meaning that when it comes to precision, a precise cut or measurement, then I'm more technical. But something like this, I'm a little more organic with it. I'm not worried about it being so precise because of the fact that this is just really the cosmetic effect of it. And for its overall intended purpose at the end of this, it won't even be seen on camera for the most part. You know what? So I'm just doing I'm going to use this as my actual ruler. So let me line this up and then score this and then snip it. Styrene, I usually get in different sheets. There's a 0.4, 0.2, 0.6, 0.8. I like to work between the 0.4 and 2. 0.8 is very thick. Just to give you an idea, this would be a 0.8 in terms of thickness. Then this would be the 0.4. The difference is, of course, this is, for me, it's hard to cut, but you can use it for heavy structures. This is more pliable for me. And there's a 0.2. There's a 0.1. And then once I score it, snap. Okay. And I want this to be approximate to this size. A little smaller. So indication there. This is what I mean by organic, because I'm not going to use a perfect straight edge. I'm going to build on top of this anyway. That's my reference. And that's how I'll do that. And then with this, I could I'll maybe create some additional paneling, like an effect. My edges is kind of, and I can get some texture to it. I don't have a lot of model kits pieces for my model sets in terms of tanks and vehicles and things, but the loose pieces I do have, that I have salvaged, I'll put them to use just to get some texture to this thing. And right now at this point, it doesn't make any difference if it's exact. Go ahead and get a piece of something in here. I think that is it for now. So let me just put that glue, and I'll just glue this in place. Yeah. And this little blob of the styrene, the glue, hold it down, and instantaneously it sticks. And after maybe about up to 30 seconds, less than 30 seconds, you have some wiggle room to move it around a bit. But once it sticks, it probably sticks on contact. And you have a few seconds to align it if you want to be about precision. And because I built over 80 something odd models, over 85 models on my own, I'm at a point where I'm just trying to really get it done. I'm not so caught up in the every minute millimeter, and so that's just like and I can build on more texture, and I can score it also to give some texture of paneling or make it like plates, like it's metal. Just to put a little bit in there for texture. So when I paint it, it doesn't look flat. Let me see. Shift it a little bit. So, just so you can get some of the detail in that. I usually like a lot of detail in my work. Sometimes. And because this piece, to me, is simple, but it's like, I'll probably add a few more layers of styrene to it. Some of the tubing, the piping I have. This is a 1.8 or a 3.2 millimeter. This is a 9. That's going to be too big. I don't really need the 9. And this is a 4.8. Let me see how this is going to work. I'm going to create some additional piping on this just to get some texture to that electronic junction box. Most of the time, these pieces, they slide in when they fit based on size. So I'm going to use these pieces, and I want to create some kind of pipe effect alongside here. So I have to look at it aesthetically and say, how do I want this? I see there's an additional piece here, so maybe I will have some pipe, and I can add some cable or wire that connects, so it seems like a connected unit, of sorts. I think I'll actually use that. I'll actually use actual wire. That way, one of the things I notice about when I build these models, sometimes when I disassemble them, the batteries, those pieces, the covers, they get lost. So that's a good idea for me to anchor it in, so that way I can just slide it off, where I don't have to lose the piece. So let me figure out how I'm going to do this one. All right. Organic. I got it. For this piece, I'm going to cut off a section. This little scoring and snap it. That simple. It's that simple. So we're going to have a lot of fun with this today. I think I'm going to put this here. And again, I'm being very organic with this. Yeah, and I'll have that piece. All right. I got it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend these to give it some curvature. One way I usually do this is I heat it. Use a heat gun. My heat gun I have stored away. I'm not going to take it out. Sometimes you can use a cigarette lighter and gently under the flame until it's soft enough you can bend it. Or sometimes if you have a candle, a small little candle wick. It's best to sometimes use something that's not an open flame. But I've done this so many times. Or sometimes you can just gently, and this tubing is a hollow tubing. Some tubing is not hollow, or this you can it has some flexibility to it. That's one way of doing it. And just gently, just keep squeezing it. But if you're in the rush, and then you can glue that in place while you got that curve, that bend. What I'm going to do is I'm also going to, for my purposes, I'm going to get that candle. So be right back. I'm going to get that candle because some of these are actually too stiff to bend based on the thickness of the styrene. And the solid rods are more harder to bend. But when you use the flame, it's more practical. All right, so I'll be right back. I did bring in this. Cat McDowell, why are you using an open flame? Okay, again, just technique. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take part of the thin tubing and give more of a bend. This becomes tricky sometimes because if the plastic is too close to the flame, what happens? It'll warp. And so I don't really want to warp. I want to get a nice bend. I want to try to get me a... So I will find a little area and I'll put it over the flame. Over the flame. And I'll rotate it to get it soft enough. And then it'll, after a while, just on its own. Okay. And then I want to make sure I do it slow because sometimes when it bends, it does warp. And I don't really want to warp. Because it is hollow, it has a tendency to warp sometimes. And I'll hold this in place for a few seconds. Get it where I want. Okay. And now I have it. Ta-da! And then this, now if I cut this to what I need, and this becomes the piece in which I will, ta-da! And I'll add this to here, which I'll connect some kind of way, this piping to that piping. And there's another section pipe here that I'm going to connect it to. Yeah. All right, so, and that's how that will work. So for now, I'm going to snip this. A little bit. I'm going to put this back in place. And then align it the way I want it, where there's some kind of alignment with this previous piece. And I'm just going to keep that permanent. Use with that glue. And that's that. I'll let this dry. I'm going to work on a few other pieces because the overall top of the model, there's certain parts of the roof that are not completely. I'm going to work on this little rear section here. I'm going to sketch it out. So I'm going to take a break and then get back and show that piece what it's going to look like. And I can show you some more of how I'm using the glues and the additional pieces of model kits to make it come to life. And then I'll paint those and I'll put them in place. All right, we'll be back in a second. All right, so here I am. I'm back. All right, so in the process, I went and I took out some of my stored pieces of old model kits, spruces, you know, and I cut a few strip pieces of some styrene that I'm going to use for the additional structure. This piece, I want to maybe add a little more of this good stuff to this, give more texture, and I'm going to work alongside this. For the sake of time, there's a part of a roofing that needs to be covered up, and so instead of using the actual styrene, I've used some of this adhesive tile, you know, the self-adhesive. This is the shape that I want to cover up some of the loose wiring and things on it, and so it looks kind of So if I decide to, whatever angle I come in, you don't see all the garbage. You won't see all the wires and the wiring tape and all that kind of stuff. So this is the shape I'm going with, but I decided to do with this adhesive tile. This is a simple wall tile, you know. And so this has solved the problem in the cutting and all that kind of stuff. So, and this also aesthetically would go with the rest of the texture because it's all throughout this structure, there's this tile. So it has some visual continuity. All right, so that being said, that I'm put aside, and I'm gonna use my spruce, get right to it, to look at pieces that have this appeal to me, you know. These additional pieces, I'll use this for another big structure. Before I end this episode, you can see I have a few other practical models here. I'm going to give you more of a close-up with these because these are actually in the film. And then I'm going to show you the shots with the AI using those practical models and how you can see them actually flying in space and all that kind of stuff. It looks really cool. It looks fabulous. So, all right, let me get right to it. Let me see. What can I do with this? These are the last scraps, remnants of the model kits that I have. Some of these model kits, well, they can run you a bit. For the model kits I use, I prefer to use Revell. I like the level of their kits. Most of the model kits, not only, but most of the model kits I use is from that company. I like the quality that their model kits. It's not a promotional thing, Revell. Anyway, it could be. Look at more spruce. No, I'm gonna use these. Oh, here's some stuff. These are actually parts of a tank, armored tank. So I'll use these because it has some texture, and when it's painted well, when the light hits it, the model, it creates more depth. And I'm gonna use some of these. 1, 2. After I cut these pieces out, fabricating it is the easy, fast part. All right, I'm done with that. Put that down. Let me get to my glue. All right, the piece I started off with, I may add a little bit of scoring to it, just to give it some texture and scale. This is what I mean by the organic. Your preference, you may decide to use a ruler or straight edge. I don't always do that. After a certain amount of years doing this, I just jump right into it. And in my mind, I'm thinking about the composite shot. And, you know, this little detail, although details make a difference, it's that minute you wouldn't even see it. To make a point, there was, in the production of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you know, I guess ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, when they designed the, was it Industrial Light and Magic? Let me retract, I don't know if I'm exactly sure, so I want to give credit where credit is due. But in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg, they built the mothership with the aliens, and they had a little tiny miniature R2-D2 on the model. The people who were building it did it as a gag, like, hey, it was part of another kit, but you couldn't even see it. If they didn't point it out, I saw a documentary on in Close Encounter of the Third Kind. They were building the model, and then they did a little behind the scenes. They showed it, a freeze frame, and I'm like, what? Yeah. So sometimes these things are in these model kits. You know, the artists, when they design these things, they put those elements in it, and you wouldn't even notice it. You wouldn't know what to look for. So let's give some texture to this. Let's see. And this will take a few seconds. Make sure it's lined up relatively decent. Here's one with some tubing. Let me see. I want to finish this off. That. Then eventually I will paint these Typically, most modelers, when they paint their models, the typical thing is to paint a neutral gray. I usually don't paint a neutral gray. When I first started doing this and I learned that technique, instead I do a coat of black, a black matte, and I'll explain that a little bit later on. Another technique when I'm doing the painting aspect and show you how and why it works. And that the black works for me. You can paint it any other color you want. You can paint it as a base. You can use a rust color. You can use a red, depending on the overall finish tone that you want that to be. But I usually have the tendency to use the black. And the end result is that it saves me time and weathering. And I'll show a technique in that. All right. So I think this is good to go for now. And that's going to be that panel. And this is going to be part of this decorative thing up here. All right. So now, for the sake of time, I'm going to cut this down short. We're going to take a break from this. And this is going to be the final on this. But I want to just, put these aside. That's going to be for the final parts of this. My little 3 pieces for the roof and that front paneling. Put my glue away. Candle I don't need. Now, let me just give you some tidbits. This is one practical model I built during the pandemic. It's a mining vessel. Not to give too much away with the plot again. This is actually in my film. And I'll explain that in the film. But anyway, these are, again, pieces of recycled materials, kit bashing materials that I've used. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you in the edit the actual scenes where this is. And with the generative AI, I enhanced the model. So there's a slight variation in some of the model, but you can see this is the base source. Again, when I use AI, I just don't prompt. I put my work in it. I create the models. I do the sketches of my designs, and I use the generative AI to enhance that or to make it come alive. And nothing wrong if you prompt, but to me, I got to put the organic element into it. Here's another model that I have offside. I want to show you. That's also in. This is one of the shuttles. That's actually in. Okay. Ta-da! Ta-da! Give you a wider view. Ta-da! Okay. And this is actually in also. This took me about a month or so to build. It has working parts. It has illuminated parts, engines that light up of sorts. These engines here, they light up. These engines light up. And that kind of thing. So, and they usually use a 9-volt. Okay, these operate with 9 volts. Da-da-da. Okay, and that's also, it's lightweight. But I'm going to show you this also, this model in the clip, and you'll see it. All right. That being said, let me just go back to it. And that about wraps it up. Show your support. Go to Artizfacts Art on my YouTube channel where you can check out and see some of the behind the scenes of my upcoming sci-fi project, the practical models, artwork, all that stuff. The artist Kevin McDowell here. And we're going to take it from that. And I'm going to just enjoy me a wonderful beverage. This is a wonderful drink. It really hits the spot. I feel nice and toasty inside my place. I'm blessed to have some heat, and I'm kind of scorched up. Anyway, check you guys out. Lemonade. Yeah. Check you guys out. Peace. No chicken grease.